Welcome everyone, it's Nick Ottinger once again, bringing you the Xfinity Pro Track Guide here for Iowa Speedway. So, repay version that iRacing gave us here, and it's actually a pretty fun option. And just to give some insight towards it already, it's not as a wide groove track as it has previously been in years past. So you still have a bottom and a middle lane here, and we will dive into some of those lines here a little bit more frequently. But I'm a personal believer of running the bottom side here at this track to conserve tire and still maximize your straight exit launch, which will help conserve your rear tire where you're not sliding it so much as well and inducing more heat and wear to the right front specifically when you're running the middle line. But with that said, I'm going to let this play through for about 5 laps here, and we'll just go over some primary details we need to look at this new repay version. Alright, so there's 5 quick laps here. They go back pretty quick. Now, a couple factors we're going to have to look into for turn 2 and turn 4 this week is the low grip avenues that are more apparent in this new repave version. And it's that transition to the new repaved asphalt to obviously the old style that was here in previous years. So that said, I'm going to go back to lap 2. That was my really clean lap in my opinion off of 2. But I want to really dissect turn 1 and give you guys a good gauge. So in the notes you guys will have provided, this week, and like you do every week, this week I incorporated some screenshots for the angle that is going to be important to get to just before your partial throttle stage and right at your partial throttle stage when you're during the corner. So I'm going to slow this up a little bit, about an 1/8 speed, and you really follow an angle here. Obviously, it's not a perfectly straight line where we're going to the wall. I never like to go straight and then turn away from the wall here abruptly because I don't like to overload the right front with too much wheel input and turning away instantly, because all that does is just overload the right front. And in this bumpy section we have, it really hurts the potential of the front end, giving you really a lot of handling traits that just not optimal at the earliest part of turn away from the wall. So much like we discuss every week, I like to angle my car just a hair It could be like a millimeter or whatever, centimeter. You're trying just to turn it away from the wall to set the nose from when you actually start lifting, so you have the response to do what you need. Now, that could be a really quick lift point, a slower lift point, or a really slow lift point of just coming out of the gas in like 5 feet, 20 feet, or like 75 to 100 feet, right? So this track is very different. This is a bumpy section once you get really past this grass into this paved section. It is arguably, you're going to notice it more than previous seasons in just this section alone. Once you get to the new repaved section, you really don't have to worry about bumps and upsetting the car. So slowing it down, you can see I'm angling towards this actual seam and just lifting. And then I get to my braking trait and braking phase. Now, this is the area that is really, really important. Through this whole section, we're just going through the bumps a little bit. And just before the paved, new pave section, we're trying to make sure our angle down to the weight line in our apex is sustainable and optimal. So I like to put the right front at a track like this, just above that new fresh repave, that seam, the highest, part of the seam, and to make sure once I start releasing the brake, I'm using as much arc as I can, okay? So that's keeping my rolling phase up to speed. It's keeping my minimum speed where I can actually control it more into this braking zone and then fully get off the brake to decide where my rolling phase starts, my rolling phase ends, and then, ultimately get back to the throttle. So, as you see here, my right front, where this paved section starts, you're going to see it's going to be above that point. So I'm going to back this up a little bit, and you can see it crosses it now. Right front is above this corner where it starts and that seam. So that's that entry angle I like to have, okay? That's the right front and right rear is going to be higher than that. But you can see I'm not using a lot of wheel angle and yanking the car down to this weight line too aggressive. So now this is where the car is going to start becoming a little bit more compliant. It's going to actually be a lot easier than years past to get it down to this bottom with less brake and not really pitch the car sideways in this section. So I'm going to let this carry down with some brake and start straightening the wheel up and use even more of a decreased brake pedal to now I'm starting my rolling phase, and I'm still not on that weight line, but my objective is to use this weight line, this darker grip, darker pavement down here as a tool, and that is a benefit to the left front getting some extra grip, and even the left rear if you can actually pinpoint how to load the car from center to exit of 2. So as you can see, the Mortgage logo here, I'm just about to be completely off the brake. Right here, you're going to see maybe 1%, but I'm really getting off the brake right now. Have a rolling phase past it, have a rolling phase all the way until I get my apex on this line and hold it. Like I said, I'm trying to sustain this apex. It's not a perfectly 70 degree, turn, not a 30 degree turn, You got to follow this line as best as you can to this point and make sure you're not clipping the left edge of the splitter there. Now, I'm going to be looking at this pit exit line and this wall as my reference and tool because now I already know my min speed. I have the car capable. Now I want to get back to my partial throttle to start using lap time gain to my benefit and making sure I'm not too heavy in the throttle. So in this stage here, I'm getting to partial throttle now, and why that is important, you're not going to see it right now, but why that is important in most cases, later on, I'm going to be using this to my benefits when the pace is slowed down. That way I can actually load the car up here, and I'll show you guys around like 25 or 30 so you can see it. But here is where I'm going to be using that section really important, this line and this pit exit wall, as an important tool for me. And that's to make sure I'm carrying that minimum speed before this section and carrying it all the way through here, and ultimately keeping the car balanced doing so. So I can use this line as I need to, keep the car balanced and gripping on this section and making lap time. So let's go back to cockpit view here. And still on this line, and you can see how much of a benefit it is. And now there is a, I would say, Iowa 2 logo here on the wall as a tool and a reference again to where I'm getting to full throttle in that section, but I'm just getting the left front off this line, right? You can see it's just starting to inch off this line. And that is important to recognize, because if the left front's off of it, you already know the left rear is going to be off of it at this point. So as soon as you know the left rear is off this, and then now you still have the left front just about to get off this, now should be an important quality to recognize, hey, I can go full throttle, and I have to make sure I'm not opening the wheel up too early and getting my exit compromised. So smooth part of the track, still smooth. And this is where a lot of people will push tight off the corner and then get really loose off of turn 2. And I'll show this on lap 1 as well, on how I even did this off of turn 4. So this is an important quality to recognize in the car. Now you'll see another line here, and my reference point, what I look for is this line. I want to make sure my left front doesn't cross here, because if it does, I know I'm exiting too high. It's a very faint, different color here. You know, it's a little darker of a line, just like this is. But that is a good reference for me, because I look at this point here, that where this actual paved lane is, and where these stop, I like to keep the right edge of this, my right side tires, under this point. And that is important because I want to make sure I'm exiting as straight as possible and not adding a rear wheel slip and wheel spin past this exit. Now, it's just the seam, you know, the seams at this track can be quite deceiving. Ultimately, you're going to add a little bit of banking here from this section to this section, to where the right sides will want to actually gain a little bit of turn, which is not a lot, but you're going to notice that banking difference, okay? And then once you open the wheel up here, you're going to see just how much it starts slipping, right? You can see how much of a correction I have at this point. So I'm going to go in chase view, and you can see it in slow-mo. The right rear is getting to the paved section, and now the left rear is crossing this line. That left rear crossing seams is very important at a track like this, because you can plug the left rear, meaning you can actually plug it and get it to have grip and kind of push you straight, or you can have too much wheel angle, and when you plug the left rear, you're not opening the wheel up enough, and you actually pitch it a little sideways with the banking you have. So that's a common theme on a track like this. And now the car is going to get straight. If I'm already up at the wall here at this point using a whole extra lane, I'm having to use way more wheel to stay away from that wall, and then I'm going to even compromise my exit even more. So again, really focus towards a straight exit at turn 2 and turn 4. Cannot implore that meaning enough for you guys to make sure you have a straight exit. Just because you can get to full throttle earlier at a track like this does not mean you do it, because you do not want to have to get back out of it and slide the rear tires. So let's focus towards turn 3 now, and let's have this slow. Go about a quarter speed into there. My turn-in point is going to be the Iowa logo, okay? You can see the Iowa Speedway logo. My turn-in point, where I want the right front turning away from the wall, even a little bit, is before the I, okay? I'm already loading the car, just enough for when I'm actually getting to my lifting phase. So now I'm going to cross this seam with the left front. I start my lifting phase, and my car is going to track straight because I'm not using too much steering angle, and I'm not having to turn away from the wall later like we always discuss. So now I'm into my braking phase, similar tendency to turn one. I don't want to use too much braking crossing this, you know, pavement change. So I'm really steady on consistent brake. The more wheel input I add, look how much I'm actually taking some brake out of it. Now, where I start angling my corner even more aggressive, meaning when I'm trying to angle to keep my apex, is around the Iowa turn 3 sign and paint on the outside wall. That is where I start angling down, okay, to try to get to this line again. I want to get to this paint. And you can tell I'm in this rolling phase. Still in a rolling phase. Now, this is actually going to have a sharper exit to it than turn 2, and utilize all this banking as much as you can, and keeping the car balanced before you get to your full throttle. So now I'm going to get ready to get to partial throttle, and you can see I'm close to max wheel input, right? So I'm working that linear process to throttle and keeping the car angled here, not using too much throttle to pitch the car onto that paint, and not using too little throttle to keep this wheel angle and still getting on this banking. I'm just finding that happy medium in between, keeping partial throttle and steering angle to keep that line without the left edge of the splitter hitting. So now this is the difference. I would say at turn 4 exit is a well into the throttle early on, and well before the Iowa turn 4, sign and logo on the wall and the paint. Now, this section you feel like you have a lot of potential to exit up higher, right? But same thing like turn 2, you don't want to cause a push loose in this car. This car will push exit and then get really free and light in the rear because the back end of the car is rising. So this section very important. You see a dash mark for your pit entry line. I think that is a good tool to realize, hey, I need to keep a certain angle to that point to make sure I'm keeping some wheel input to make sure my exit is straight as possible once I get to this zone. Because if you're, let me give you another angle. If you're out in this lane from driving the bottom at the center of the corner, you're already exiting too high, okay? You're pushing the car tight, and then it's just going to break free because you have to get out of throttle and or use too much steering angle to the left to turn away from the wall for exit, okay? So really important to keep the bottom side at an angle like this, because my objective, my reference I use is keeping the left sides under or clipping this point. You looked at turn 2, that point. I look at it for turn 4 as well. And you can see banking again. Banking's going to load a little bit more into 2 and 4 right in the middle lanes that we just discussed. So that may give you a little bit more turn initially. And you can see half my car, left side tires under this point, right? But this section here even more free and prone to a push loose than turn 2 is off of turn 4. So see how slow it is. You cross it with and plug that left rear. You obviously are not tracking the car back straight like you would turn 2 exit, using a straight wall. Here you still have a bend and a turn radius off of 4 and working through a little bit of bumps. So something to factor in, and it will be all the way free if you have that quality to the exit of turn 4 all the way to the wall. To mitigate that feeling completely, you would just be partial throttle to this section, exit a little bit lower, so you can actually make sure the left rear is not crossing in this ultimately new pavement change, and just keeping the car straight as much as you can. That is what you would do to try to mitigate this feeling, but this track in combination, you have to have a lot of compromise in some regard to make lap time. So I talked about lap 1. I want to go through it again on lap 4 or turn 4 so you guys can see what I'm referencing. Turn 2, I get a little, I would say, overzealous crossing that. Now turn 4, we talked about that push loose condition, how the rear can actually bite you a little bit. I'm going to this banking right now. I got this car compressed and I feel it pretty good. my exit angle, not as crisp as I was lap 2, right? My exit angle is actually pointing to the wall sooner. So I push out, and now all this wheel angle I have here, I'm going to start sliding the rear now once I cross the seam, and you see I have to get back out of the throttle, right? So not a good quality to have. Something that's very easy to do, and you can see how I'm tracking the car all the way to the wall. Now let's do this in chase view. Something you don't want to have a consistent trait. See, just look at that area. That is an area that can bite anybody at a track like this, especially when you're in a racing scenario. You don't want to have that, quality happen too often. Now, we discussed we were going to look at lap 25. Let's go 26. Go to chase view here again. And show my partial throttle stage that I was referencing before. A little less brake overall on the stage. Now I'm back to partial throttle around this stage here again, right? And now I'm really just trying to manage that angle, center to exit. Exiting a little bit lower like I referenced before so I get the rear grip. Let's see how turn 4 looks. If it looks better than lap 1. Exiting a little bit lower as well. So, ultimately, some things to really focus towards is not compromising your turn 2 exit momentum, not compromising your turn 4 exit momentum by just not pushing the 100% throttle too early. Okay? So, I'm going to let this play through for the next 3 laps here, 4 laps, and then we'll close out this video. Alright, well, this lap closes up. If you guys got anything that you want to reach out to me on, look at some G61 laps or anything, please just reach out, DM me. Obviously only a DM away or a message away, but once this lap closes out, that'll be it for us this week. So good luck this week, and let's have a solid week. Good luck, guys.